Hello, welcome back to the Monster Train discussion series. This is being recorded live on Twitch because of the fact that my video files got corrupted and I lost a bunch of progress. So I'm cutting the last hour of stream and I'm turning it into the discussion series recording. Woohoo. If you want to join me live for things like this, it'll probably never happen again, but, you know, go ahead and check out the stream. Today we're finishing up the discussion series on the champions with Rector. Here he is. Talking about Rector. I think that of all of the champions to discuss, I dread discussing Rector the most for one reason. Right here in the middle. Harvest Rector. But let's just get into it, shall we? I've talked about it with all the other champions, and I'll talk about it with Rector as well. Oh, I recognized in the Penumbra one, and now I'm pointing it out. Each of the champions answers a specific question for you. So Rector, I'll give you the short version if you just want to watch this video for 2 minutes and then click off. First of all, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And second of all, here's your breakdown. Burn Bright is the best Rector. In the past, like with Hornbreaker Prince, with Sentient, with Tethys, and even with Penumbra, I said that you can choose between these two, you can choose between these two, you can choose between Explosive and Spikes, and you can choose between Reaper and Wrathful. Burn Bright Rector is the best Rector in almost every circumstance. It's really hard to think of a situation where if I were trying my best to win, I would pass Burn Bright Rector. He's too good. But if you don't get offered this Rector, you can choose Harvest or Dark Calling. Harvest is a big tank that does a great job of killing bosses for you after Daedalus, and then Dark Calling is kind of like a splash in for Reform idea, but you can build around it as well. We'll get into it a little more as we talk about each of the types. Let's just start with Burn Bright. Let's just get right into it, shall we? There's a lot to talk about with him, despite him being just straight up the best. He kills heavies, but his stat line is just too much, right? He's a 2-space 145 at level 3, 80 at level 2, and 50 at level 1. If you remember in the Penumbra video, talked about Trample Penumbra being very good stats at 170, 100. I'm willing to pay 6 space for him. Burnout Rector is 145 at 2 space. That's good. On top of that, it's like his caveat is easy to play around, I think, because you can just go to every Melting Banner and find Lady of the Reformed. If you go to enough Melting Banners, you should find a Lady of the Reformed for him. If you don't, there's other answers to his Burnout. There's Wickless Recruitment, there's the Endless Tome, and you can just mold him back as well. Overall, it's just really, really good. He can take a big chunk out of every boss, including Seraph. You just have to give him enough Burnout extension. God, Burn Bright is good. I think I would go so far as to say, and I will take comments from the chat on this one and acknowledge them now. I think that Burn Bright Rector might be the strongest champion in the game across the board. He doesn't have a point in the game where he's weak. He's just always strong. Rector seems like the epitome of the whole Burnout is stronger than normal because huge downside. Yeah, it's like, but I think it's easy to play around his huge downside, right? The Burnout 3 is not hard to play against, I think. And at 145, the stat line is just too juicy in the late game. He's only off by 25 in the mid game from killing a heavy, and in the early game he does just kill the heavy. Yeah, Nolson, extremely good point. Something I should touch on as well. I think that basically there's two main combats I want to point out that you need to watch out for with Burnout Rector. The first combat, if you blind pick Burnout Rector in the first combat, you need to think about how you're killing the boss if you don't have a Burnout Extender or just plan for him to die. Can you kill him with your starting deck of Train Stewards and Drinks? A lot of times the answer to this question is yeah, you can. However, if you can't, it's worth considering not playing him. Just wait, draw him again at the end, and have him 1v1 the boss for you. If you can extend his burnout, this Rector is just auto trials. You can take every trial in the first 2 combats with confidence, except for the only one you have to really look out for is damage trial on the clergy. If you take that one, he will get overpowered. Strong, but if you don't get a Lady by Daedalus, you probably have problems. That's true as well. He is very reliant on Lady of the Reformed. Extremely reliant on that by Daedalus in particular, because the cards that you pick up to make him easier, Endless or Wickless Recruitment, are rares, so you shouldn't have them by Daedalus. There's nuance to him for sure. You gotta play with him, you gotta learn how to play him, but if you're sleeping on Burnout Rector, you gotta look out. The other combat I want to talk about, and this is a niche combat, this is going to be a 4 or 5 combat you really have to watch out for with Burnout Rector. It is the combat with those 10-2 stealth units. If your plan is to have Rector and Lady of the Reformed sit on a floor, and you play them on the second floor with something that clears backline on the bottom floor, like a Hot Shark, for example, your Lady and your Rector will burn out, and you'll lose the game. It's a very niche caveat where it's like, I have Titan Sentry, I have Burnout Rector, and I have Lady of the Reformed. Or if you're just killing the enemies off with spells, you will not let enough burnout through for Rector and the Lady to get their burnout extended, so prepare yourself for that. The real downside is that he has no backline killing potential. That's true, like, it really true, right? He takes a big chunk out of bosses. If you can give him enough tanking, he can just kill Seraph. 145 is huge damage. If you give him enough multi-strike, you can have him kill Seraph on his own. I think I had a run with Wickless Recruitment and Furnace Tap, where I gave Rector like 9 multi-strike and removed his burnout, and he killed Seraph on his own. He killed everything. It was very powerful. Burnout Rector is he's the greatest. Burnout Rector, just pick him. Like, actually just pick him. You'll learn the nuance, and it's worth it. Let's move on, shall we? The next one. The one that people tell me about the most. Hey, I think you're sleeping on Harvest Rector. Hey, I think Harvest Rector is really good. Hey, Harvest Rector, have you considered that it can solo Seraph? Harvest Rector. 2 space, all the Rectors are 2 space. He's a 10-15, then he's at 15-25, and then he's a 30-50. And he harvests for +1, +5, +2, +10, and +4, +20. Harvest Rector is fine. The important thing you have to think about with Harvest Rector is how you're getting him his harvests. He synergizes really well in the early game where he's the weakest with things like Jack Strips and Rules of Containment, ways that auto-kill backline for you. It's just free harvest for him, and he scales out of control. Your biggest hurdle with this Rector is beating Daedalus. You also have to make sure you have something reasonable to put behind him. Any sort of scaling damage is good. Cold Kalia with a multi-strike, Brandon Warrior just getting some slays in there, a Animus of Will with a Razor Sharp Edge involved, anything like that, right? Have I ever considered Harvest Rector? That's a good point. No, I haven't actually. Tell me more. Harvest Rector is good though. You can win with him. He synergizes really well with a lot of things. Killing tombs on his floor is really good. Stealthing him is really good. Like an endless stealth tomb lets him just 1v1 most bosses. Yeah, he really is like, he's the same thing as something like Gorge Penumbra, where your biggest hurdle with both of these is getting past Daedalus. If you can get past Daedalus, you're probably home free. But Daedalus is a big stopping point. We'll do the same sort of math we did with Gorge Penumbra. Even in a world where you harvest, let's say, let's give you a nice easy estimate of 20, right? It's +20, +100. If he's at 30, 115, which he won't be at 115 because he'll take some damage, but still. At 30, 115 against Daedalus, he'll go roughly 12 rounds is going to be my math, and 12 times 30 is only 360. Harvest Rector on his own will never defeat Daedalus. You have to have something behind him. But he synergizes well with anything that sweeps, like Sweep Slay as well. I think that Probably multi-strike Cold Kaylee is the best thing to put behind him because you can scale up Frostbite and also kill backline. But yeah, he's solid. He's a good secondary pick. I think he's the worst in Umbra because Umbra doesn't have a great unit to put with him, and I don't think that Melting has great units to put with him either. Maybe Wickless Baron, but I feel like their early game is really gonna struggle. Those first 3 harvests are really hard to get them scaling up to a point where they'll kill backline. And like Paraffin Thug is okay maybe, but in Umbra, I think you're better off picking Burnout or Dark Calling always, and then in any of the other clan combos, Harvest Rector can do well. A few videos went up of highlights from the stream of me playing Harvest plus something. There's a lot of good choices. Harvest Rector does well with like Alpha Fiend, really like almost any unit you can think of that is a scaling damage dealer goes really well with Harvest Rector. I think that's it. Anything you guys want to say in chat about Harvest Rector? First couple of turns are also scary, that's a good point. If you play him down, especially in the early game when he has 15 health, he'll die to like a 4-1 play against Clergy if you don't have a plan. You gotta look out for things like that as well. Synergizes really well with Tombs and Imps, and is weak pretty much everywhere. Like, he's weak everywhere in Umbra. Spilled your coffee all over your desk, F in chat. I'm gonna give you an F. F in the YouTube comments for that one. Alright, finally Dark Calling, the weird one. Dark Calling is a 10-10, resolve, reform 2 random units, and then it's reform 2 random units and enhance them with an additional +5 attack, and he's a 20-20. And then it's reform 2 random units and enhance them with an additional +15, and it's a 40-40. This one's okay. It's better than Harvest in Umbra. Like if you're offered Harvest or Reform, pick Reform. Use it as a morsel generator. Oh, yeah, true. Harvest Rector does work well with spikes. I didn't mention spikes. Good point out. Good catch. Definitely forgot about spikes. But yeah. I think that Reform Rector is your pickup in Umbra. Umbra Melting, I think he's the best choice of Harvest or Reform. And yeah, same thing as Harvest, I think, which is you don't really do well early game with this Rector. He's a late game pickup. In the late game, he's pretty strong. +15. I had a run recently in the Umbra Melting training where I had a Rubble Morsel up to 100 attack because of how many times it got reformed. You keep the deck tight, you keep your reforms very, basically, make those random 2 units not random, right? That's what you want to do with this one. When to splash, if ever? Honestly, I don't think you splash Reform Rector ever. You can try it if you want to try it with Harvest 2, Reform 1, but I've never tried it. It seems good in theory, but I feel like the +4, +20 is just better all around than reforming 2 units is going to be for you. Other than that, anything else I really want to say about Reform Rector? Oh yeah, he synergizes really well with Formless Child. Getting 2 or 3 Formless Child payoffs is good, but it's really hard to reform Formless Child and then play it and have it hit a unit that you want it to hit while also not having Reform Rector just reform it himself, right? If you're picking Reform Rector, you typically, in my opinion, want to play him middle or bottom floor, because he will. The reform order goes like this: he will reform units at the end of his turn. So units that are eligible are any units that died on a floor above him or on his floor in front of him. I think this will this will include morsels who get eaten on his floor, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, putting him middle floor I think is ideal with something to tank for him, and letting him reform like dregs and drafts that burn out above him, as well as reforming like things in front of him that die, like his tank, for example, or just some drafts or dregs or whatever. One last thing, or I guess 2 last notes as well. He will not reform the first round on top 4 because of Dazed. Resolve does not trigger. And he will not reform at the end of the endless combat, or the relentless combat, rather. You will not get a reform off of the boss. Super clunky, and I think that you can win with him as your main plan. If you're going in on reform and you're not using him just to regenerate morsels, you're probably removing everything else from your secondary clan and you're going all in on reforming drafts and Lady of the Reformed. And like, maybe Lady of the House, but I haven't tried it. And yeah, Reform Rector requires a lot of thinking and I don't like it. I think that one of the other two is simpler and easier to get to the win conditions, but if you really like Reform Rector, go for it. I think the Reform Order makes him pretty hard to play. I agree. Oh yeah, and he does really struggle against Train Stewards. Like, you want to remove Train Stewards with priority with this man, because reforming Train Stewards feels really bad unless you get him like 3 or 4 times. To finish it out, we'll talk about the combos you can do here. Basically, if you pick Burnout 1, you're never picking Burnout. You're never picking anything else, I don't think. You should just stay on the path all the way. I've thought about trying to splash in like Burnout 1 Harvest 2 as like a little raw upfront damage, and then you get the bunch of harvests in there. In theory, you would get a lot more health out of it, but you would have you'd have a reasonable attack, right? I haven't really ever tried it, but the main reason is because why would you? A flat 145, 145. It's not like you get anything different on the Burnout 3 here. The caveat, the consideration you have to take doesn't change on the way to Burnout 3, or on the way to Burn Bright 3 rather. So there's really no reason to splash anywhere else. If you're accommodating him at 1, you should just accommodate him at 3. And then you can try mixing like Harvest and reforming units, but I really feel like, again, you're missing so much on the payoff here. That +4/+20 is juicy, and I don't think it's worth the 1 to reform 2 units. Maybe, if you're going, like if you're harvesting a lot of tombs and you have just like nothing but tombs, it can be good. But I don't know. I haven't really tried it, but you could, and you can prove me wrong, I suppose. I'll open it up now, Twitch chat. If you have anything you wish to say, speak your piece before I press the end video and say goodbye to YouTube. You may now speak. All right. Hakuna Matata. All right. I think that we got all of the Twitch chat commentary, and I think that all of the good heads up was good. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you for watching live as well with this video. I appreciate your input. You probably picked up on some things that I would have missed, and thank you. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave me that like. Subscribe if you want to see more in the discussion series, and I will see you in the next one. Farewell.